He gave away food to hungry men. He thought he was saving his son. He never knew the bread was carrying secrets.
In the summer of 1961, the air in Miami hung thick with more than just humidity. It carried the weight of exile, the bitterness of loss, and the quiet hum of a war that no one officially declared, but everyone was fighting. Nowhere was this tension more palpable than in the neighborhood of Little Havana, a patchwork of pastel-colored houses, cigar shops, botanicas, and small eateries run by men and women who had fled Cuba just months before, their suitcases filled with photographs, rosaries, and the fading scent of home. Among them was José Mendez, a man whose name would never appear in history books, whose face would never grace a newspaper headline, but whose hands, every single day, shaped something far more powerful than he ever imagined: bread. José was 42 years old. He had been a baker in Havana, not a revolutionary, not a politician, not a soldier. He had kneaded dough under the Caribbean sun for 20 years, his hands calloused not from guns, but from flour and water. When Fidel Castro's revolution turned from hope into something harder, colder, José didn't protest in the streets. He didn't join underground cells. He simply packed what he could: a change of clothes, his late wife's wedding ring, and a small photo of his 8-year-old son, Juan, and boarded a fishing boat bound for Florida. He arrived in Miami with $37, a broken watch, and a silence that never left him. Within a year, José had scraped together enough money, through dishwashing, night shifts at a cannery, and help from a Puerto Rican landlord, to open a small eatery on Southwest 8th Street. He called it El Pan de Vida, the bread of life. The sign was hand-painted, the chairs mismatched, the counter stained with coffee rings. But the bread, the bread was perfect. Crispy on the outside, soft within, baked fresh every morning before dawn, just as his father had taught him in the hills of Orient. But José didn't just sell sandwiches. Every day at 11 a.m., rain or shine, he wheeled out a small wooden table onto the sidewalk and laid out 20 free sandwiches. No questions asked. No ID required. Just hunger, and that was enough. He called it La Mesa de los Hermanos, the brothers' table. It wasn't charity, he'd say. It was dignity. A man who eats with his head high is harder to break, he once told a young refugee who'd been evicted from his room. Food isn't just for the stomach. It's for the soul. The table became a quiet sanctuary. Cuban exiles, many of them former doctors, lawyers, pilots, now janitors and mechanics, would sit there in silence, chewing slowly, as if each bite could bring back a memory of home. Some cried. Some prayed. Most just stared at the ground, as if the pavement might open and return them to the streets of Vedado or Santiago. José never joined their conversations. He watched from the kitchen window, wiping his hands on a towel, his face unreadable. But those who knew him well saw it, the way his eyes lingered on a boy with hair like Juan's. The way his shoulders tensed when someone mentioned the name Castro. He never spoke of his son. But everyone knew, Juan was still in Cuba, living with his grandmother in a crumbling house near the university. Letters arrived rarely, and always censored. The last one, dated March 1961, read only, "I am fine. School is hard. I miss your bread." José kept it in his wallet, folded so many times the paper was soft as cloth. What José didn't know was that by mid-1961, Little Havana had become a chessboard, and every Cuban exile was a potential piece. After the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion in April 1961, the CIA was desperate. President Kennedy had publicly disavowed the operation, but privately, the agency was under immense pressure to undermine Castro by any means necessary. Conventional warfare was off the table. So they turned to covert action, and to the very people who had the most to lose, the exiles. The plan was simple: infiltrate Cuba with intelligence, sabotage equipment, and build a network of dissidents from within. But to do that, they needed untraceable couriers, people no one would suspect. Not spies. Not soldiers. Ordinary people. And who was more ordinary than a baker giving away sandwiches? The CIA's Miami station, operating out of a nondescript office near the airport, began quietly identifying potential assets. They looked for individuals with deep emotional vulnerabilities, strong community ties, and no criminal record. José Mendez fit the profile perfectly: grieving, isolated, and, most importantly, trusted. His eatery was ideal. Hundreds passed through daily. No one paid attention to who took a sandwich. No one cared. And that was precisely why it was perfect. The man who approached José didn't wear a suit. He didn't flash a badge. He came as a friend. His name was Rafael Ortiz, or at least, that's what he said it was. In reality, he was a CIA asset handler, fluent in Cuban slang, trained in psychological manipulation, and paid to find weaknesses. He began appearing at El Pan de Vida in May 1, 1961. At first, he just bought coffee. Then he started helping clean up after lunch. He told José he'd been a schoolteacher in Camagüey, that his wife had died in the purges, that he understood loss. José, starved for connection, let his guard down. One afternoon, as they washed dishes side by side, Rafael said quietly, "You feed men's bodies, José. But have you ever thought about feeding their freedom?" José frowned. "I'm a baker, not a general." Rafael smiled. Sometimes, the quietest hands do the loudest work. For weeks, nothing more was said. But Rafael kept coming. He brought news from Cuba, real news, not the censored kind. He told José about a secret school where children were taught to spy on their parents. About ration lines stretching for blocks. About a boy in Santiago who'd been arrested for drawing a cartoon of Castro with donkey ears. José's hands shook as he kneaded dough that night. Then, on July 3, 1961, Rafael made his move. He came after closing, when the street was empty. He placed a small envelope on the counter. Inside was a photograph. It showed a boy in a blue shirt, standing in a schoolyard, laughing. Behind him, a mural of Che Guevara loomed large. It was Juan. José fell to his knees. Rafael knelt beside him. "He's safe," he said. "He's healthy. But Cuba is getting tighter. If we want to get him out, we need help. From people like you." José's voice was a whisper. "What do you want me to do?" Rafael didn't say, "spy." He didn't say, "betray." He said, "Just keep doing what you're doing. But sometimes, the bread will carry more than meat." The method was crude, yet brilliant in its simplicity. Every Tuesday and Saturday, Rafael would arrive before dawn with a small, sealed envelope. Inside, a thin sheet of rice paper, printed with microdots or tiny, coded coordinates, locations of Soviet radar installations, fuel depots, missile transport routes. José was taught to slice a loaf of Cuban bread horizontally, place the paper between the layers, brush the edges with egg white, which dried clear and held the seal, then reassemble it as if untouched. The sandwich would then be wrapped in plain wax paper and placed on the brother's table. The recipient, a man or woman trained to recognize a subtle mark on the wrapper, would take it and disappear into the crowd. José was never told what the messages said. Never told where they went. He was only told, "Every sandwich you give brings your son closer to freedom." The first time he did it, July 12, 1961, he vomited afterward. Not from guilt, but from fear. What if someone saw? What if the bread fell apart? What if one was harmed because of this? But then Rafael brought another photo. And another note, "Juan played soccer today. He's strong." So José did it again. And again. Over the next 8 months, he prepared 142 special sandwiches. He never missed a delivery. He never asked for proof beyond the photos. He stopped sleeping. He started weighing every loaf twice, triple-checking the seal, praying the egg white wouldn't crack. To the outside world, nothing changed. But inside José, something broke, and something else grew, a terrible, desperate hope. What José didn't know, and what the CIA never told him, was that his role had shifted in October 1962. By then, U.S. intelligence had confirmed the presence of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. The world stood on the edge of annihilation. And in that moment, the CIA realized something chilling: Cuban intelligence had infiltrated their exile networks. Several couriers had been captured. One, under torture, had revealed the existence of a sandwich drop in Miami. Instead of shutting down the operation, the CIA made a cold, calculated decision: keep it running, but feed false information. José's sandwiches now carried deliberate lies, fake missile locations, imaginary sabotage plans, invented names of non-existent dissidents. The goal? To confuse Cuban and Soviet command during the most critical days of the Cuban Missile Crisis. José, still believing he was saving his son, became an unwitting instrument of strategic deception. On October 24, 1962, the day Soviet ships approached the U.S. blockade line, José handed over a sandwich containing coordinates for a secret missile site near Cienfuegos, a site that didn't exist. 3 days later, Khrushchev blinked. The crisis ended. But José never knew his small, flour-dusted hands had played a part in steering the world away from nuclear war. All he knew was that RAFAEL'S stopped coming in November. The photos stopped arriving. The lists of evacuees vanished. And the brothers' table grew quieter. For 2 years, José waited. He wrote letters, to the Red Cross, to the Vatican, to the U.S. State Department. He visited churches, synagogues, even a Baha'i center, begging for help. He offered to work for free, to spy for real, to do anything, just to get news of Juan. Nothing. Then, in March 1965, a letter arrived. Not from the government. Not from an agency. But from Father Emilio Ruiz, a priest in Santiago de Cuba who'd once baptized Juan. The letter was smuggled out in the lining of a tourist's jacket. It read: My dear José. With a heavy heart, I must tell you, Juan fell ill with malaria in the summer of 1963. The clinics had no medicine. He died in his grandmother's arms on September 12. She followed him 3 months later, broken by grief. There was no evacuation list. There never was. Forgive those who used your love as a weapon. And know this, in his last days, he asked for your bread. José read the letter once. Then again. Then he walked to the beach, waded into the Atlantic until the water reached his chest, and stood there for hours, letting the waves wash over him. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stood, until his body was numb. When he returned, he didn't close El Pan de Vida. He kept baking. But the brothers' table now held 30 sandwiches. And every one was given with the same silent prayer: may no father ever be fooled by hope again. In 1974, a young reporter from the Miami Herald, researching a piece on Cuban exile networks, tracked José down. Were you a spy for the CIA? The reporter asked. José was sweeping the floor. He didn't look up. I was a baker, he said. I gave food to hungry men. If some of that food carried secrets, that wasn't my doing. That was theirs. He paused, then added. But my real crime wasn't giving sandwiches. My crime was believing that powerful men care about boys like mine. The article was published under the headline, The Sandwich Spy Who Wasn't. It ran on page 9b. Few read it. José never gave another interview. José Mendez died in 1989 of heart failure. He was 70 years old. He had no family in the U.S. His funeral was attended by a handful of old exiles, a priest, and the man who used to deliver his flour. His eatery was sold and turned into a bodega, then a cell phone shop, then a vape store. Today, no plaque marks the spot. No museum preserves his story. But in the CIA's declassified archives, under file number CIA, RDP 78-03477A0001000100001-4, there is a document titled Operation BREADCRUMB, Final Assessment. It reads, in part, Asset M7, José Mendez, Cuban national, proprietor of El Pan de Vida, demonstrated exceptional reliability over 18 months of active use. Motivated by familial extraction promise, unfulfilled per policy. Unaware of disinformation phase. Provided critical channel during October 1962 crisis. Recommended for silent termination. No debrief required. There is no mention of Juan. No acknowledgement of deception. No remorse. Just cold, efficient language, about a man who thought he was saving his son, but was only ever a tool. The story of José Mendez is not a spy story. It is a story about how ordinary kindness becomes a battlefield in times of war. He never held a gun. He never cracked a code. He never even knew the truth. But he gave what he had, bread. And in a world where trust is the rarest currency, that was enough to make him useful. His tragedy wasn't that he was used. His tragedy was that he believed the lie that love could be bargained for. Today, as new waves of exiles flee war-torn lands, Ukraine, Sudan, Gaza, they carry the same hope José did, that somewhere, someone will see their humanity, and not their utility. But history has a cruel habit of repeating itself. So the next time you see a stranger offering food to the hungry, ask yourself, is this charity? Or is it something else? And more importantly, who is really being fed?
He never held a gun. He never cracked a code. But in a world where trust is rare, even kindness can be turned into a weapon.